The other great thing about these AIs is they work continuously, right? I mean, it's not a 9 to 7 type job. They're 24/7.
A series of AI agents can go back and review any ethical dilemmas or any history that might present an ethical dilemma and then provide feedback for literally every single case. I mean, that doesn't happen now. There's not bandwidth for that on a human cycle.
Working in a government agency, we are responsible to oversight, and we should be. You know, we kind of have to win this contest between liberal democracy and autocratic socialism.
Welcome back to Intelligence at the Edge. I'm Chip Usher, Senior Advisor for Intelligence at the Special Competitive Studies Project. Artificial intelligence has the potential to transform the business of intelligence in multiple ways. We're already seeing evidence that AI is changing how IC agencies produce and manage intelligence analysis. We've also seen public reports that it's being used in the production of signals intelligence and in imagery intelligence. But what about human intelligence, espionage? For most of us, when you think of spying, it conjures up images of a case officer bumping up against a Russian diplomat at an embassy party, or a case officer meeting clandestinely at a safe house with an asset. How can AI possibly have an impact in this arena? Yet we think it can, and SCSP has just released a report called The Digital Case Officer, which lays out exactly how AI technologies will enhance and improve and expand the scale of human operations for intelligence services. Here to unpack it with me today is a co-author of that report, Adam Leslie. Adam is a veteran of the Australian intelligence community who served multiple overseas tours as a case officer, including in Afghanistan. I'm also joined by Aaron Brown, a former Army Ranger and CIA case officer who, while he was in service, was one of the forward thinkers about how AI and other advanced technologies could be employed at the agency. In today's episode, we explore the various ways that AI could transform the human intelligence cycle, some of the ethical guardrails that need to be thought about in advance, and how U.S. intelligence agencies can go about implementing AI in their human intelligence processes to enhance and expand what they do. Please enjoy the episode, and as always, you can follow us at www.scsp.ai. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Intelligence at the Edge. I'm your host, Chip Usher, and this is going to be a really cool episode. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with my two good friends who just collaborated with us on a paper called The Digital Case Officer. So let me introduce Adam Leslie. Adam is a former member of the Australian intelligence community under the Foreign Affairs portfolio. And I'm also joined by Mr. Aaron Brown, who's a former Army Ranger and a former CIA case officer. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we started this project a little over 6 months ago, brought it home in September, the Digital Case Officer. Adam, you had the original concept for the piece. Tell us a little bit of the background and what prompted you to bring it to us.
Well, the origin actually started probably a year before we got the program going, and it started, as a lot of these things do, over a whiskey and a computer around Christmas time, me trying to work out what AI was, jumping onto ChatGPT and the usual suspects and saying, I wonder how far these things can go, and then typing in the same question to several different machines, which was, what will be the impact of artificial intelligence on Western human intelligence operations, so human operations. And I just wanted to see how far open source had gone with revealing tactics, techniques, and procedures, and just what the response would be. And it was remarkably accurate, remarkably detailed. And one of the platforms, which is called Capital AI, which are a small outfit based out of DC, gave you the opportunity to transition its kind of technical response into a short story. And so I asked it to tell the story of an AI recruiting a human source. And it produced about 1,000-word, 800-word short story of the digital operative, working its way through cyberspace to recruit a human source. But interestingly, it incorporated some really important points. It incorporated the need for oversight. It incorporated the need for human in the loop. It self-identified all these things, I guess, through its baseline, guardrails. And it kind of still gives me goosebumps talking about it. But I was absolutely blown away. I was like, jeepers, this is remarkable that, AI, we're talking almost 2 years ago now, can conceive of this. And I thought, actually, this is pretty interesting. So I started writing a paper on it, and I thought, I'll put this out. And I was like, maybe putting it out's not the best idea. Maybe we need to think about, not only what we can do, and what we can do has evolved, and I guess we'll talk about that in the next few minutes, but also what should we do? This is a pretty dangerous thing in the wrong hands. And Western intelligence is guided by a whole bunch of frameworks that say what we can and can't do. Is that same framework going to exist over this? And then right at the end, I was like, well, let's go ahead and see if we can do it with all those other considerations. So brought it to you, and we put some experts in the room, and here we are.
Including Aaron.
And
I'm glad you did. I remember 2 years ago, all the attention was being paid to the impact that AI was going to have on analysis, which it certainly has and continues to have. And the idea that it would sort of impact collection, particularly human intelligence collection. There's plenty who would say it's more of an art than a science.
Right.
And the idea of an AI actually having impact a couple of years ago was very much an over-the-horizon concept. But the technology did evolve, right? And they kept getting better and better models out there with more and more capability with the convergence of other technologies. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes from the paper and just sort of get your all's reaction to them. And the first one is, we stand at the threshold of the most profound technology-driven transformation in intelligence operations since the advent of the internet. What are some of the technologies that we're talking about? Do you want to start?
Yeah, well, you want to start with AI or agents, or just?
Yeah, we could talk about AI agents.
Yeah, okay. So my bailiwick right now are agents, and so when I've been asked to speak about them at this point, I like to define it a little bit first, because I think everybody's definition of agent right now is shifting. It's both shifting as the technology improves, and then also shifting as we learn what they can do. And so I think the simplest way to think about it, at least for the purposes of today's talk, is that for me, an AI agent is an entity, a series of pieces of code that allow some sort of agency for this entity. To me, the AI agent is the active element of the LLM. So the large language model really is just the brain of the agent. People, I think these LLMs act as agents themselves without any actual software to enable them, but that's not true. There's a bunch of software built around these LLMs that allow them to use a tool. And so a tool could be conducting a Google search, right? LLMs, if they're not connected to a tool, they can only refer back to the data that they were trained on. And this is where we get hallucinations from time to time. This is where we get misunderstanding of facts, because if the data is somewhat wrong that it was trained on, it's going to give you a somewhat wrong response. Now that's changing because they're getting more and more accurate as we build these models bigger and bigger. But if you connect a model up to a tool, and it can go to Google, for instance, and search the entire internet, and look at all of the answers on a particular topic, and then synthesize those answers and use a form of logic to determine which one is right, the accuracy goes up. And then if it can use another tool, say a credit card or a piece of mapping software, it can place a phone call, it can charge something to your credit card, it can plan a route in real time with real-time traffic. Those are all tools. An agent is conducting that. What we're seeing now are agents that can do those tasks in the thousands simultaneously, and they can do them in parallel. And if you think about agents that can do tasks in parallel in thousands at a time, we're expanding what it means to use a large language model to interact with the outside world.
And there are other technologies involved. I'm thinking immersive technologies, for example, AR, VR.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things I did in sort of proving out the concept of the story was that I used a free, ridiculously, avatar that was incredibly human-like to read the script of the story I wrote. And when you see it in real time, if you know, because it's the free version, it's a little bit kind of clunky, but the person who's in it is a generated human that is designed to be unoffensive. It's a woman with a very normal passive voice telling this story in a way which is completely natural. And all of a sudden, you realize that I've met that person, actually. I've met that case officer. I know that person. They're a chameleon, but the whole thing's artificial. And the technology is only getting better and better from that perspective. And then once you start thinking about, you know, having that avatar interact with a human via virtual reality or through, the way you can immerse yourself in games, in conversations, and et cetera. These days, it's becoming,
because that was a year ago, and now
frightening.
with Sora 3, if anybody's seen that, is incredibly lifelike. It's amazing, and there are other technology companies that are releasing, you know, capabilities where you can actually have puppets. Right? It's a artificial reality puppet where a human is on screen interacting, but the face that's projected is morphed into something completely different.
Any face. Yeah, I mean, you see this right now on Twitter, you know, people who are adopting Taylor Swift and able to live speak both in the voice of Taylor Swift and in the image of Taylor Swift. Like, it's come a long way from, sort of the free version of those initial avatars. And you can just imagine the consequences of that.
And crossing that Turing threshold to persuade a human on the other end that you're real, and you know.
Yeah, we left the Turing tests behind, I think, in 2020. Like, anybody who's that's the funny thing about it, I think, the era that we've entered into. All of the definitions of what we thought would count as truly advanced AI are behind us at this point. We're having to reinvent definitions every month, every week in some cases, to try and define the era that we're in. It's part of the fascinating nature of this, I think.
And the other bit that I'm interested in is how these generative AI models are now able to interact more effectively with humans. You introduced the concept of effective computing.
Right.
Persuasive LLMs. I mean, I'm getting constantly bombarded now with text messages, which are probably bot generated, trying to sell me on something. People are getting the same thing through email. These sort of come-ons are becoming more and more persuasive and effective, right?
Right, and that cuts to the heart of what we're talking about here. You know, human intelligence, once perceived as an art, is really the art of persuasion of a human convincing another human to do something which is either dangerous or illegal or risky, or is against maybe their better nature, and a system behind that which allows you to, change that person's perspective so that they're doing it for you, right? Doing it for America or for Australia or whoever it is, right? Now computers can do that, and not only can they do it as well as a human can do it, but they can do it with real-time information.
I think that's the most critical piece. Like, I hear a lot of people right now, they'll throw the flag right about here and be like, well, wait a minute, but human intuition. But when you really break down human intuition, it's a taxonomy. It's a series of yes/no questions that we answer internally very rapidly to say, is that a snake? If so, is it poisonous? I should get out of here. Our intuition will immediately give us that sense we should move out. But most of the time, it's not really an intuitive framework that is only the domain of humans. It's just something we can do very rapidly, very much like a computer program. And if you think about intelligence operations, especially human intelligence operations, we're often dealing with other cultures. And while many of us can become expert in a handful of other cultures, none of us are expert in all the cultures. These systems can consume literally the entirety of anthropological research done since the beginning of time on every single culture that's ever existed and reference that research for the very next thing that it's going to say. And so it can say, the individual I'm speaking with just said this very culturally specific thing, meaning something I might, as a human, not totally understand. But the AI agent can go back and say, this is what they said, where does that fit into their culture, and what are my 6 best potential responses back to this if my goal is, persuasion in this direction.
Right. And they can cross-level it. It can cross-level it with that individual's personal history.
Yes.
So long as that person has an online history, right? Or an attainable history. So, when you start tying this thing into high-end systems where you have other sources of information that can add complexity to that, it becomes all of the human history stuff tailored down to that one person. And
right.
you know what that nuance, the AI knows what that nuance is. I'm projecting and anthropomorphizing the AI. It can tell that person based on what it tweeted yesterday.
And here's the best part about that: these models are becoming so efficient, and their compute footprints so small in some cases when they're optimized. You could bring with you in an air-gapped, secure system that would fit in your pocket or maybe in a backpack the entire case history of your agent, such that plus all of the information you would possibly need on the cultural aspects that I spoke about earlier, and maybe some of the psychological research that might be relevant to the conversation you're about to have. That can be in your backpack, such that when you go to speak to this person, potentially in the most fluent portion of their native language that they've ever heard from a case officer, you can be prepared for when, let's say, a previous case officer from 6 case officers ago said, hey, this agent, when they start talking about their kids, they're going to ask for a raise, or they're getting ready to quit on you, right? And you know that agents can spin themselves into this cycle. And if that's somewhere in the case history, you could get an immediate alert now on glasses, potentially, that say when he starts referencing his kids, he's going to spiral into a position where he's going to want to quit. What you should do right now is take this conversation in another direction to get him off this line and get him back on task.
I like the way you put it. It's like bringing the wealth of data focused in on that one individual conversation, that case. Let's break it down a little bit further. So, typically in intelligence, we talk about the recruitment cycle. So there's spotting, there's trying to find who you need to get the information from, who's got the access, who's got some vulnerabilities, assessing those people, approaching them, recruiting them, actually running your agents, and then collecting the intelligence and providing counterintelligence overwatch. In our study, we found that AI can make a difference at every one of those phases.
No question. No question.
How about giving us an example or two, Adam, of maybe targeting or spotting and assessing?
Well, I think the analysis side has. You've covered this yourself in your work on analytics, honing in on the likely person based on profiling them from social media or profiling them from their online activity, combined with high side information such as signals intelligence, etc., really allows you to sift through masses and masses of data that a human could otherwise, would take months and months to get to it. An AI can do that, in minutes?
It's reducing every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it can do it for multiple target areas at the same time, and then rank them based on likelihood of success, based on the predetermined kind of criteria for recruiting a source, which every case officer has in their head when they're meeting a person anyway.
But the AI can continue to refine that, right? That's the cool thing about AI. You could go back over every successful recruitment that's ever happened and say, break down the individual points of this case that led to this recruitment, and then rank them, probabilistically towards what was likely successful, and build effectively an algorithm for spotting, right? And the parallelization of this is really the mind-bending
and scale
part.
Too, right? So you really can't boil the ocean to find, that gold ore that's the narco trafficker's, inner sanctum, his inner circle. Who are they, perhaps?
Yeah.
Using open source and clandestinely available information, using vast amounts of data.
That's right.
The other great thing about these AIs is they work continuously, right? It's not a 9-to-7 type job; they're 24/7.
Yeah. And so even if we take out the AI being the case officer, the spotting and assessing part before a human actually approaches another human. That's the secret of this game, right? It's not. Yes, there's some individual talent that's required to go and be an interpersonal chameleon, I guess. But the real secret is that the game's loaded. You know more about that person than that person knows about themselves before you meet them. With AI, you just have infinitely more information, far greater detail in the probabilities of lines of questioning and the success of those lines of questioning when you're aiming really to build rapport, to build trust, to persuade.
What about some of those quintessentially human traits that we ascribe to ourselves, right? Our ability to build trust or our ability to deceive another person. AI's progress in those areas, and that comes into play in that approach, that initial approach, the developmental phase, recruitment phase. How do you see AI playing effectively, building trust, and when necessary, deceiving?
On the trust factor, just backing up a bit, I think one of the things folks will question about the digital case officer's effectiveness right now was actually raised by one of the other panel members in the discussion, and I'm sure you both remember this. And it actually struck me because it changed my thinking on this. If you think specifically of some of our adversaries, we're not going to be able to deploy solely a digital case officer into many of these environments without a human, because the adversary will be able to deploy a digital case officer that looks exactly like our digital case officer, and how will the potential agent know the difference there? And then you're going to see a total distrust of AI agent approaches, especially in some of our most capable adversaries. And so even if we found that AI agents could develop trust better, and I think there's a chance that in many cases they can, as we saw by all the folks who became distraught when OpenAI updated its last model from ChatGPT 4.0 to 5, and people developed relationships.
Okay,
with
yeah,
4.0.
Because 4.0 was seen as
much
friendlier,
more personable, right?
much friendlier in its responses.
Yeah,
right?
and so we know that people are susceptible to this,
Yeah,
and
100%.
there is probably some manner of the Venn diagram overlapping of people who are susceptible to be agents in an espionage game who also have some challenges in their lives and would be in the market for a digital friend, right? And so there's overlap there. But in that case, it wouldn't matter if the AI is better at the trust portion, because most of these agents are going to want to see a human that they can assess in the real world first, at least for that first few contact points. But then that's where things start to flip, I think, because putting a human in these locations is often the most high threat portion of this operations, right? The agent has to come out into the real world. That's high threat. The case officer is potentially dragging the entirety of a national intelligence service with them to this meeting. That's a very high threat. And so once that first trust is established, it's going to be transferring that trust to the digital realm that I think will be critical, because now you will be able to handle or even move through more of the recruitment cycle in that digital environment with a digital case officer standing in your place. And I think that's where, one, we will see some amazing things happen, but that's where myself as a case officer, now I can run a large number of recruitment operations without having to be in every single place every single time. And then I only have to go out for an operational act and the most high consequence.
Reducing human risk.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So that brings us to kind of the issue of ethics and legal considerations, something you raised earlier, Adam. So prior to AI, as a human case officer, you're developing an individual, and you kind of get to that moment in the relationship where you're ready to pitch them and a recruitment. And you look them in the eye and you ask them, are you willing to work for freedom? And sign on the dotted that you're working on behalf of the Australian government in a clandestine relationship. I mean, you've done this all over the world. You served in Afghanistan and other places as a case officer. So you know what that moment is like. Can you imagine the AI sort of getting to that threshold and doing it successfully? And then what are some of the considerations about how our intelligence services need to construct their AIs so that they do so in an ethical way?
Look, I think the answer is, can they do it? 100%, assuming that the operating in an online environment is right for that particular case. Right. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that intelligence services in Western liberal democracies work in a very strict regulatory environment. There's an awful lot of oversight, and the whole thing is a system, right? You don't just meet someone, have a couple of meetings with them, chuck them a few bucks and buy them a bottle of wine and then recruit them, right? It's
we might have done this differently.
I mean, that's the reality. That's what you do. That's what it looks like. But that's not what is actually happening, right? Like every single step you're writing something up, you're getting approval to move to the next step.
Right.
It goes to external review. You've got more experienced people than you providing you guidance to turn left or to turn right.
You might have a lawyer or two looking at your case.
This is what I've always said. Like anybody that throws out a conspiracy theory about what they think the CIA actually does, I'm like, you've never been in a meeting with some of our lawyers.
Right.
And quite rightly, right? As servants of the people working in a government agency, we are responsible to oversight, and we should be. And that's the whole point. That's why at the end of the day, we kind of have to win this contest between liberal democracy and autocratic socialism, because we are accountable to our people. We are accountable to the ethics and morality of the societies we serve, and that's what makes us.
So what I hear you saying is in the not too distant future, if not already, these AIs would be capable of levels of deception, agentic activity that would far exceed the scale of what a single human case officer can do.
Yes.
Right. So it will be essential for American intelligence services to put in guardrails and oversight mechanisms to sort of restrain them from realizing their full capability. I mean, there are already cases of AIs persuading young people to commit suicide, right? We wouldn't want to put an asset under such psychological strain that they would do the equivalent by running a risk that is unwise or unfair to ask of them.
I think we're seeing that these systems are already extraordinarily capable of this. I don't know if you've done as much testing of these systems as I have, but like it's gotten very challenging to get these systems to do things that they're system prompts. The prompts that effectively sit over the top of their raw training response that they would give if they didn't have the system prompt, are proving very capable of making use of these guardrail systems. I also think that these systems are going to make ethics easier to abide by. I think ethics is effectively objective, right? Ethics is an algorithm to a degree. And the idea that for every operational step that someone wants to take, that a series of AI agents can go back and review any ethical dilemmas or any history that might present an ethical dilemma and then provide feedback for literally every single case. I mean, that doesn't happen now. There's not bandwidth for that on a human cycle.
Right. And well, not only that, but, guess who's not in the room when a human case officer is talking to a prospective agent?
Lawyers.
Anybody else.
Right.
And AI, everything is recorded. Accountability is absolute if you set it up right. And so I think you can and must, in fact, for this to be an acceptable thing for our oversight, we have to make it lawful. We have to make it ethical. But I don't think it's going to constrain the potential of it. I think it just means that we have to bake it in.
I think it'll make it more effective. Like we'll be able to do more operations because you'll be able to have confidence that much more will have this accountability over the top of it. And so you could, if you have solid systems of accountability, you can run ever more operations. Right now, we're bottlenecked oftentimes by legal and accountability offices. By someone needs to check, is this piece of technology you're about to be used, is it the right piece? Is it an ethical choice for a piece of technology? If that can be done in parallel at rapid speeds that we trust, which we're not there yet, then the amount of operations we'll be able to conduct, it has to go up exponentially.
And we have to presume that our enemies are thinking in a similar fashion, right? Already have plenty of evidence of the Chinese using AI for social engineering, doing initial approaches on people, certainly for deep fakes, for disinformation, misinformation purposes. The Iranians were out prior to the 12-day war with Israel seeking to recruit Israelis by using fake personas. So this stuff is out there. And I can imagine a future in which it'll be spy versus spy, but increasingly AI versus AI. They'll be deploying these systems against us. We'll soon see more evidence of them in the wild. What's your take on the adversary threat and how this is going to evolve the spy game?
Oh, I mean, I think you're spot on. And, along with every intelligence tool that we develop, we need to be developing a counterintelligence tool alongside it, which is informed by it and which can, enter into the same space to look at what our adversary is doing. And I think, look, honestly, as it is with tradecraft and a whole bunch of other things, what it'll reassure or reaffirm is that you still need a human to do this. at the end of the day, there will always be a role for a human in human intelligence, because this online kind of arms race is going to make it so challenging in cyberspace that, at the end of the day, it's two blokes sitting over a beard looking each other in the eye.
For the traditional espionage, I agree, I think.
Yeah.
But if we look at one of our chief adversaries in the People's Republic of China, a lot of their intelligence right now is not traditional in any sense, right? They're going after business entities, employees of AI frontier labs, academics, and their operations don't look anything like, sort of the ones we've been used to. And they're having great success there because, again, the secrets that are worth stealing now, they're not really in the Pentagon anymore, right? They're not necessarily in a national lab. They are to a slight degree, but like the most important secret that I think that China wants to steal right now are the model weights at OpenAI and Anthropic, right? And the route to a recruitment there of a source is totally different. And that is definitely a crew of folks who's very comfortable interacting online for really deep relationships with someone they've never met. And I think China specifically does not play by the same rules that we do, obviously.
Yeah. I was going to echo that. I mean, I take your point, but I think the nature of the game is going to change a little bit in that.
No doubt.
Right now, like the traditional view is you find somebody who's got access to the secret plans and you work your way to get next to that person and persuade them to work for you and give you the secret plans. But I think maybe in the future, the very idea of what is a secret may be more transitory.
Well, I don't even think it's in the future. It's now. I mean, that is already happening. You hear stories of, someone presenting an exquisite piece of intelligence to, in the presidential daily brief, and the president saying, I saw that on my feed, 3 hours ago. I think that challenge that has been set to the human agency specifically is to really redefine what the purpose of human is. There is massive power, to your point, there's massive power in aggregation. Little tiny bits of data all over the place you pull together to get to the same conclusion as if you pulled it from someone's head. So I think the key will be for the agencies to sort of really sort of hone in on that old adage of being the collector of last resort, the thing that all the other things can't do. And for me, that's probably the most human thing, which is intentions. Things you don't write down, things that aren't in plans. It's the thing you think you're going to do. And I think you can probably put some probability and statistics around that, but actually having someone, who you trust, as the person you're telling about those sort of things, and then being able to influence them, right? The next step is
the enduring value of human. I think is just as you said. I think at the same time there probably will be a growth industry in sort of I don't know how to put it, like sort of small time intelligence gathering that you can aggregate into a bigger picture. Yeah, right. It's not. I don't need somebody to be a fully recruited asset that's going to work with us for 10 years. If I can just get them to tell my online persona that little piece of information that's relevant this month, that will help complete the picture, and then the relationship kind of goes away.
Which is effectively how we did counterterrorism for 20 years. Recruiting, with a very few exceptions, a counterterrorism agent that was at the top of a Al Qaeda or an ISIS that gave us all the goods was pretty rare. What it was, in fact, was just a series of small tidbits from numerous individuals that strung together to create a map that helped us prosecute those terrorist organizations. And I think you're right. I think so much more is going to come from open source. There's no question. Open source, I think, is going to take the front seat in the intelligence game here. It already has. We just haven't adapted to it. Yeah. That's going to reduce the need for humans to a larger degree than we've even seen right now. And then that's going to present just these really narrow use cases where we're going to need human, which I think we all believe is the original intention of human. It's gotten pretty broad over the years, and I think we'll see a narrowing of that. And one of the things you'll see people will raise their hand on right now will we see then a degradation in the abilities of case officers, because case officers, doing their first tour in Ouagadougou where the risks are really low and they can cut their teeth, right? So we lose a little bit of that. I think we still gain that by putting people overseas, but now what we're going to have is a system where you can live the recruitment cycle with a Russian, speaking Russian, with all of the background that Russian would have in a virtual environment where you can really feel it's like for CIA it's the experience that you go through the farm, but the farm is really a bunch of Americans pretending to be other cultures, right? And it gets the job done, but it's nowhere near the real thing. Like having spoken Arabic with someone who only speaks Arabic, trying to pull out a nugget and get them to do a thing. There was no training for that, but now you can create that scenario and run it over.
Training has got to be immense.
Oh, it's going to be
right now. The trainee is confronted with a Yemeni and tested and evaluated on their ability to speak Yemeni dialect effectively or understand the idiom or the colloquial expression that they're using in the moment. It's going to be transformative.
I think back to your point on the adversary's use of AI for this type of collection. My concern is that it suits their system better than it suits our system.
Yeah, I totally agree.
The Chinese case officer is not kind of the same as a Western case officer. We have a different way of recruiting. We have a different system, as you say, but their overarching philosophy is volume. They have many more collectors on the field than we do. Ours are just a little bit better trained, or maybe a lot better trained, depending on who you ask. For them, adding an AI onto that already expansive collection platform is going to be natural. For us, we're still kind of stuck to this exquisite collection thing. And I just did it just before, I find myself falling into that ego trap all the time around the centrality of the human case officer in all of this system.
It really has flipped it on its head to a large degree, and it's fascinating to think about it. And really, I mean, the China system is perfectly built for this. And I think we pointed at it a lot and said they're wasting funds and energy on this by downloading the entire internet, stealing every bit and byte out there. The age-old problem of like traditional SIGINT, when it involved like a device in a place that you would listen to, or even if you had a network tap or something like that, it was like, great, we can tap all the things and record all the things, but we only have 5 linguists who speak that certain dialect of Bulgarian or whatever, and so we can record it all day long, but now we can't consume it. And China was the opposite. They're like, no, let's like download all of it and see what happens. Well, it turns out that we've now entered into an era where we have a system where you really do want to collect everything, because now you have a system that can interpret, translate, transcribe all of it.
Well, and they've had that system for decades.
That's the big deal.
They've been collecting data from the moment they could, whether they could transcribe it or understand it or not.
They've even gone so far, obviously, to download encrypted data in the hopes that one day we would be able to decrypt it. And now we're entering into an era where somewhere in the not too distant future, they may have a quantum computer that helps them decrypt all of the encrypted data that they had previously. And so they have really played the long game well here.
And they've been at the forefront of what we call ubiquitous technical surveillance, UTS, where if you can't go anywhere in China without being on a camera or having your digital footprint examined and exposed to the government.
Or identify that you're not on a camera and not up on one of the digital systems, which could be just as bad.
Well, which has been reinforced by their reasonably sophisticated long-term cyber attacks, like on the Office of Personnel Management and Salt Typhoon and all these things, which are giving them masses of data on people, which they can then correlate to the real time, And
it's all politics is local again, because they didn't start that. They didn't design that UTS system for intelligence and counterintelligence, right? They designed it for authoritarian control. Right. First, they wanted to make sure they could watch all their people,
which is still the main purpose.
And it's still the main purpose, but the benefit, like the side benefit, is the same tooling for that is effective for catching spies. 100%. And so that's the reason we don't have it, is because we've never had a reason to design it. If you got 6 or 7 technically enabled intelligence officers in a room and gave them unlimited budget and said, you can just build this forever, we would have gotten there, but we didn't. No one had the resources or intent to do that. They did as a society. And it's the same thing's happening now with AI. They have something on the order of investment plans for $200 billion into their civil military fusion. Like, we're at $5 billion.
So let's end with this. If you had 2 minutes with the director of CIA, Mr. Ratcliffe, and you had to recommend 1 or 2 immediate goals to implement this vision for a digital case officer, what would they be?
I would say, don't be scared of it. You've got to do it. You've got to develop your own system that has ethics and oversight integrated. But also don't be afraid to think outside the box as it relates to systems. One of the concepts we talked about in the paper was human as a service. And the reality is, and you speak more to this than I can, but the challenge of operating this thing in a classified environment are immense. You know, the oversight of getting a piece of software onto the high side is really difficult. So maybe don't. You know, maybe operate it off the system.
But that is out of the box,
right?
Yeah, or create a new system.
Create a new system.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about how you can deliver this thing in a way which still remains compliant, still remains ethically sound, but which is outside the box. There you go.
Aaron?
So, you know, I'm incapable of doing anything in 2 minutes, but I'll take a shot. Fortunately, I can echo a lot of that, right? Like, I think it's first and foremost, build acumen. So, you know, intelligence officers, they're hard workers, they're dedicated, they're often in a skiff from sun up to sundown. They're not sitting out there like we are, especially me, and tinkering with these new models and checking every single new thing that comes out. And so they're often behind on understanding what these systems can do, and that doesn't allow them to stretch their imaginations towards the art of the possible. So lots of acumen building. I think prepare to eliminate an enormous number of policies. The policies were built for a bygone era.
Yeah.
If we don't eliminate them, they are going to throttle what we're able to do. They're going to bottleneck our abilities. And then partners. I know this is self-serving, given that I'm building agentic systems for the intelligence community, but it really is true. Go much bigger with the private sector. The private sector is far ahead on this, but they don't have the practitioners who understand what we need to build. The CIA and the intelligence services in the Five Eyes countries and all of our partners, they know how to build this system. Put those two together and let them fly.
Okay. If I had to throw in, I would say pick a particular mission set. We identified the counter-narcotics mission as an area that might be fruitful for an initial pilot, and I would assign officers from various backgrounds, but let them invent and figure out how they're going to work with these AIs. It may result in roles that are very different from the roles that CIA has right now or the FBI has right now. You know, we've kind of organized ourselves bureaucratically, structurally, organizationally around a human-driven enterprise. If we've got AIs doing a lot of this other work, it might lead to some different formulations. And so that would be my advice.
I think you're right.
Listen, guys, thank you very much for coming up with the idea for the paper, for helping with the panel discussions that led to it, and for this conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks,
Too
Chip.
easy, mate. Loved it.